Hey, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement, bringing autism fitness programming all around the world and sharing with you the strategies, techniques, exercises, and protocols that will enhance, optimize, and awesomatize your fitness and adapted PE programs for the autism and neurodivergent population. So before we get started, number one, please like the video and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the Tuesday trainings or any future content that I put out. And if you're ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, you can find all of the information, registration, and then meet me for your live virtual practical on autismfitness.com. That being out of the way, this Tuesday training is going to be all about how and when to progress an exercise or to add an exercise to an athlete's current program. Now, in autism fitness programming, we always start out with our foundational exercises. Foundational exercises are going to be the ones that incorporate the largest muscle groups, incorporate motor patterns that we're going to use in activities of daily living or ADLs, and those that are required for a safe, strong, independent existence. And those are going to be our squats, pulls, presses, carries, locomotion, and hinging. So once we have these all configured and put into a program, we of course are going to establish an athlete's baseline, and that we do by assessing. Of course, that's what the PAC profile is for. We assess and then we address those skills. So if we have an athlete who is not yet doing all of those fundamental movements in their program, then there is good reason to introduce a band row as a pull or a band pull down as a pull if they are not yet already doing that exercise. What we really are striving to get is a balanced program in which we have at least one pulling exercise, at least one pushing exercise, the squat. With our more advanced athletes, we can add in the hinge. Of course, there are some very important caveats to that are probably not covered enough. Locomotion when we do some of our warm-up activities, and of course carrying heavy objects, because carrying things is the best way to get stronger at carrying things, and we do or should be doing a lot of carrying in our daily life. I think about groceries and garbage, etc., etc., etc. So when you have an athlete who is currently doing a few of these exercises but not all, there is definitely opportunity to introduce these exercises. Now, introducing the exercise is going to very much depend on our athlete's adaptive functioning. Sometimes we have an athlete who gets highly anxious or is very rigid about their schedule and the exercises or the activities that they're going to perform. So we may start out with just a few, and by a few I mean 2 or 3 or 4 exercises. So the athlete might be doing a medicine ball push throw, and then a band pull down, and then maybe a heavy carry, but we still don't have a squat, and we still don't have any pushing in there, either an overhead press or a push-up, depending on where we want to start that athlete. And it's not to say that we can't use both of those, but if we have an athlete who is very rigid and regimented about what's going in their program and what the schedule is for that session, we want to regard that and we want to respect that. So in order to do so, we might need some planning to introduce that next exercise. The other consideration here is that if we have an athlete who gets frequently dysregulated or off task, and we can only get so many things done. Let's say, for example, right now we're only at 3 exercises for that athlete because they're getting frequently dysregulated. We want to incorporate the exercises enough that we're producing a training effect. That means having 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 sets of each exercise, as opposed to having so much variety that not a lot gets done and not a lot gets done effectively. Then we're going to have a much more narrow structure to our session. There's not going to be a robust amount of different exercises. We're starting off with those 3, so there's room to add some of those other fundamental exercises. The question is which ones and where. So The ideal program, if we want to break it down, is going to have all three sections or phases of exercise. It's going to have warm-up and mobility, which is one. It's going to have power, our medicine ball throws, our sandbell slams, and then it's going to focus predominantly on strength because those are going to be the exercises that are most conducive to generalizing to activities of daily living safely, strongly, and with stamina over time. If they're not all incorporated right now, and it's because an athlete is anxious or they are rigid about their schedule, then it might make sense to introduce those exercises one by one because we don't want to overwhelm the athlete. So that eventually we have a program that does include the squat, the overhead press, the push-up, the band row or cable row, the band pull down or cable pull down or some type of body weight row. And then, of course, a farmer's walk and the heavy chest carry with a sandbag or a heavy medicine ball or whatever your implement that you're using. In that case, we have all of the major movement patterns covered, but it might take some time to get there and start implementing those exercises. So if we're breaking this down from the perspective of the PAC profile, physical, adaptive, and cognitive, physically, can the athlete do some modified version of the exercise? Yes. This is more on the adaptive side now. Adaptive, is the athlete motivated enough that we can include that exercise without it being detrimental to their experience or detrimental to the program? This is going to vary athlete by athlete, but if we take into account how the athlete is best supported in that situation, we can figure out a way to start incorporating some more of these exercises. If we have an athlete who's getting very frequently dysregulated, we might introduce this new exercise steadily over time because we don't want to degrade the overall training session and start adding and adding and adding more and more exercises, because really what it does is dilutes the entire program. If we're doing one set of 10 different exercises, it's very unlikely that we're going to have a training effect. So situations or programs in which not all of those major movements or those major exercises are already being programmed, there is definitely room to add that squat or add that overhead press or add that band row because that movement skill has not been satisfied in the program just yet. So let's switch it over to progressing. When do we progress or make an exercise more challenging? My standard protocol and what we use in autism fitness programming is if I have an athlete who can perform an exercise independently, meaning they don't need any physical guidance, they don't need mirror prompting, or if they do, it's very minimal, to complete for our strength exercises 3 sets of 10 repetitions with a certain weight or with a certain range of motion or with a certain position, for example, with a box squat or a push-up. If they can do that for 2 sessions, then we're going to try to increase the challenge or progress the exercise. We're not just going to progress the exercise because the athlete is having a particularly great day, because we don't yet know that physiologically they've really mastered that previous variation of the exercise. So a real world example of this is having an athlete who over the past 2 or 3 sessions has done 3 sets of 10 presses with the 4-pound sandbells. Okay, that gives me good reasoning to suspect that they will be able to overhead press the 6-pound sandbells. So we can level up here and give them a heavier weight with the sandbells because we know that they can safely and effectively and efficiently and independently perform those 3 sets of 10 with the 4-pound sandbells. So it does give us justification for overhead pressing the 6-pound sandbells. If we're arbitrary about this, it's not necessarily the case that, we're inviting a safety risk, although there is that. But if we don't know what an athlete's baseline performance is and what they can do, and this week it's 2 pounds, and next week it's 8 pounds, and the week after that it's 4 pounds, and oh, just grab the 5 pounds because that's what's available right now, we are much less likely to have a training effect because the body, the muscle groups that are being enhanced by this particular exercise are not going to have the appropriate stimulus and the continuous stimulus from session to session that is required in order to develop that training effect, meaning they're getting stronger, there's hypertrophy, lean muscle development, there's greater stabilization, and of course, especially for our autism and neurodivergent population, there is that kinesthetic awareness. The athlete has a much better sense of how to perform the movement appropriately and safely. So just by adding weight or making the movement more challenging doesn't automatically mean that the athlete is going to be able to perform that skill even, and this is really important, even when they are motivated to do so. So we very much have to understand where the athlete is at, what that baseline physical skill is, and then when the athlete meets standard, they can do their 3 sets of 10 independently. They don't need any real prompting. Every once in a while it's okay, hey, get this hand in, get that shoulder over here, something like that. But they have this on their own and they can demonstrate that they can have that same performance session to session. Awesome. Now we can progress. So how do we make an exercise more challenging? Of course, we can always add sets, add repetitions, add weight, make the positioning more challenging if we're talking about an inverted row or a push-up, so much because that's body weight, more of it is going to be on the positioning side. So the key takeaways here are, number one, when do we decide to add an exercise? We add an exercise if those fundamental movement patterns are not already met in the program. So if you don't have a squat, if you don't have a press, if you don't have a pull, then we definitely want to add those in as soon as possible, but not overriding the athlete's current adaptive or motivational skills. And we progress when an athlete has met standard, and this is something that you get in the Autism Fitness Certification curriculum. What is standard for each exercise? What should it look like? How do we modify it if the athlete can't perform it independently with motor control just yet? Again, really important. We're not going to make things more challenging and expect the athlete to just be able to do it as we would, as we wouldn't with any other individual. We have to meet them where they're at, physically, adaptively, and cognitively, and that means understanding the exercise, the way that it needs to look, the way that it needs to be performed, how it is implemented, and what to do next, of course. So finally, when we look at progressions, when that athlete has met standard, we want to figure out what is the best way to progress this exercise. Is it more repetitions? Is it adding a little bit more weight? Typically, those are going to be the best ones for strength and hypertrophy and providing our athletes with what they need in order to be more successful and more independent in their daily lives. So I'd love to know if this has influenced your programs a little bit, how you think about the well-roundedness or the focus of your fitness and adapted PE programs. I really would love to know. Put them in the comments below. And if there's a subject that you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, let me know in the comments below. Light it up. I'll definitely get to it. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. If you're ready to become a certified pro, the link is in the description down there somewhere. You'll find it. It's highlighted, I think. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll be back with another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training next, probably Tuesday.